What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Kansept Mujir. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, and I'm sorry about that. But Mujir. This is a Dirk Pinkerton design, designer that if you guys watch my channel, you're probably somewhat familiar with. But yeah, I really like a lot of his designs, and it's always interesting to look at a Dirk Pinkerton design. This was sent to me by Kansept Knives, so thank you very much for sending this along, letting me check it out. This is available right now. I will link it right down in the description, as well as Kansept Knives in general, so you can check them out if you want to. Thanks so much to my generous patrons for supporting me right now. There's a link down there for that as well. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Let's go ahead and get a measurement on this guy. The overall length of the Mujir, which is how I'm going to pronounce it for the remainder of this video, coming in at about 7.5 inches overall. So this is what I'd call about a medium-sized knife. But your opinion on that may vary. Blade length is coming in 3.3 inches overall, and then your cutting edge is coming in a little shy of 3.25. Yeah, about 3 1/8. Let's go ahead and do some size comparison. So up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1, a little bit bigger, and it's actually, I don't know, it's longer than the Rat 2, but the height and the profile a little bit more Rat 2-esque. It's not a super tall knife. It's kind of in between. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and Para 3? So you can see here, again, it is going to fall in between, but it's nowhere near as tall as either of these two. And last but not least, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and its little brother, the Benchmade Mini Griptilian. This guy's definitely a little bit shorter than the full-size Ritter Hogue and longer than the Mini Grip. I don't know why I have to say that. You guys can see it. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. So thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. You can see here, it is contoured. It's a little bit thicker than Spyderco Para 3. I don't think it's that big of a deal. This is a front flipper. So there's the height is not made worse by the flipper. Just about poked myself with the PM2 there. Length, it's about the same length as the Para 3, honestly, and definitely shorter than the PM2. Height, nowhere near the same. Honestly, even though it is a little bit thicker, it should be a pretty easy item to carry in the pocket. Let's go ahead and take a look at the inside here real quick. So you can see, boy, that's bright today. Should we turn that down just a little bit? These flashlights, I swear. There is milling on the inside, so that's going to reduce the weight just a little bit, so that's nice. We are looking at orange peel textured titanium. How interesting. This is not a finish that I've really seen hardly ever on a knife that costs what this costs. It's not to say that the finish is always more expensive to apply. It just seems to be almost exclusive to a higher price point. We're going to talk about that some more. Then we have rose carbon fiber. And then we have a blade of S35VN. I believe I saw that. Yeah, S35VN. So weight. Actually, let's do blade stock thickness here real quick so you guys can get a look at that. Blade stock thickness coming in at 130, probably 135 thousandths. So not excessively thick, but definitely not a thin blade either. Let's go ahead and weigh it. I'm going to guess this weighs somewhere around 3.75 ounces. No, less than that, 3.1 ounces. It's actually really lightweight. Ratios are really good on this guy. This is approaching the point, right? The 3-ounce point where I call it ultra lightweight. I'm going to say probably if it's legal to carry in your area, I don't think you're going to have a problem with this. Especially if you carry heavier knives, right? If you're really into ultra lightweight knives and you got thin pants, maybe not be for you, but I think most people are going to be just fine with this. So let's talk about this. This is awesome. Now, not everybody's going to like how this looks, but I am a huge fan of orange peel textured titanium. They're like little pock marks, like the surface of an orange. This is beautiful, and it gives a nice amount of reflectivity to it, and I don't know, it's visually appealing. Does it offer any benefit? Well, there's slightly more traction to it than, polished titanium, but not really. It's really just more of a visual thing. I'm going to say this right now. Off the top of my head, this is one of the only, well, it is the only knife I've ever seen at this price point, and I'll go ahead and tell you this is a $200 knife, which it's expensive. I mean, that $200 is a lot of money for sure. But this is the only knife at this price point I've ever seen this finish applied. I'm not saying it's the only one in existence. It's just the only one I've ever seen. And I know that this is not a common finish for this price point, right? I'm sure there's a lot of different reasons for that. Again, I don't know that it actually costs a ton more money to do this versus just like a milling pattern or something like that. It's just always seemed to be something that was exclusive to a higher price point. I really like this. I would like to see a lot more of this at this point in this price territory in the knife world. I'm a big fan of that. Something I'm not a huge fan of is the way that they did the corners. Focus. There we go. So this is just like a 90-degree drop off. And like right here, I mean, it's not sharp. It's just like an abrupt drop off, and it doesn't look bad. But you can see there, because of that finish, the edges look a little, crunchy, right? Grindy, especially areas like this. Yeah, that's not my favorite thing in the whole world. I would have liked to see those be a little more rounded off, right? Obviously, the finish can't be applied because I don't know, they probably could apply it to the rounded areas, but I think it might have just, if those were softened up a bit, it would have looked better. Does it cause any disadvantage whatsoever while you're using it? No. It's just, that's a product of a sharp corner when you're applying this finish. That's just what, it just looks a little bumpy down here. So that's a fussy, reviewer nitpick, right? It's just, I love the finish. I don't like what it does to the corner, so it'd be cool if that was knocked down a little bit. This bolster looks great. And the transition points, right, from bolster to titanium looks awesome. Rose carbon fiber, I'm sure we can, kind of put that together, that it essentially looks like, a rose head in some of the areas of the carbon fiber. I think that looks really nice. By the way, this does come in a few different variants, including one that has a Timascus bolster. It's a little bit more money, but that is an option. Then they've got one with DLC titanium. I'm not sure if this same texturing is applied to the DLC one or not, but that is an option. So you have a couple of different choices there. You know what? We didn't do it all. We didn't do the hardware check. That's fine. We can do it right now. The pivot is definitely going to be, I've actually already checked this, but I'll do it again for you guys. The pivot is definitely a T8, and that's largely the case with many Kansept knives. The handle screws are T6, and there's just a couple of them, and then there's one for the pocket clip. The downside to this knife is that the pivot is definitely free spinning, and I did a review on it. I'm not saying that all free spinning pivots create exactly the same level of frustration. Some range from mildly annoying to extremely annoying, depending on how it all fits together. But in general, free spinning pivots are not good, and they generally are, I mean, it's a simple, design fix, is that if the pivot barrel is D-shaped or is captive in some way, sometimes they can do it with the bolster material, right, or the frame, like they can cut the frame a certain way. A captive pivot is just better, because if I want to adjust this, I need a driver for both sides, and you have to do this. And anybody who's done that, which is probably like all of you, you guys know that sucks. I hate doing that. Just captive pivot so that something like this wonderful fat little WIA driver that you can apply a ton of torque to, and I definitely have linked down below and you can pick it up. It makes it so much easier, no matter how much, sometimes there's excessive blue Loctite and some there's just a little bit. It's so much easier to pull a pivot out, no matter how much Loctite, as long as it's not red, if it's not free spinning. So unfortunately it is free spinning, but there's minimal hardware and you can get around this. So at least it's Torx and not some proprietary weirdness. So that's fine. But anyways, I do like the black hardware on this guy. I think they could have gone satin or black. Doesn't really matter, right? But the black does look good. It's got a nice black backspacer back there. So all the way around, really, the only thing that bothers me is just the edges. Ergonomically, yeah, this is very comfortable. You are confined to this specific space, and that's because of that butt end right there. Me personally, I kind of like it when the butt end doesn't have that hook shape, so that I can kind of move around and decide if I want my hands, all the way to the end or right here. But it does lock you in. So if you've got hands that are like mine, you're pretty much confined to one space. But that one space is decently comfortable in terms of the shape, but you are feeling the corners a little bit. It's not like, oh no, ow, my hand, but you can definitely feel it. And I can also feel the pocket clip a little bit. But the clip isn't a bad design. I'm just letting you guys know what I'm feeling. It's not the most masterful ergonomic experience I've ever felt, but I am locked in and I would feel confident using this. The jimping is definitely in the right space, and it's got a nice sort of medium pattern. So it's not like mega ultra sharp and aggressive. I kind of like that, how they did that. But yeah, it'll work barehanded or with gloves, whatever. There is plenty of room to engage the lock bar right here because they've got this area cut out. I kind of like that the top of the lock bar lips in underneath the bolster. I think that looks really cool. There is no double clutch or anything like that. This is a front flipper, and it works really, really well. It's pretty easy to engage that. The detent is definitely tuned correctly, and it's nice and smooth. The action on this guy is really great. I had a Kansept come that was kind of tight, and it was also a front flipper, and then I corrected it, and the action just ended up being okay. This guy feels pretty good. It's nice and smooth. As is the case with any front flipper, I find them just generally less convenient than something like an opening hole or something like a thumb stud or just a regular flipper. As is the case with all things, you will adapt to it. So if you really, really want to carry a front flipper, you'll adapt to it. It is your only choice for deployment, though. So you can basically wheel it out slowly, or you can do this. I think you're generally speaking much more likely to drop or throw your knife on accident if it's a front flipper, just because of the way that your hand has to be positioned, right? On top of that, it's made a little bit worse by the fact that this is an exposed frame lock. So you have to have your fingers right here. So you got to be cat's pawing it, and then you got to apply the right pressure and go that way. First time I handled a front flipper or played with it, I definitely had some issues with it. It took me a couple of days to get it down where I was confident, but still, it's like every 1 in 100, I miss or I drop it. If you're going to go out and use this knife, right, and you're working over a pond or a lake or something, that's not the best thing in the whole world. It's probably not going to be that big of a deal. It does add a certain level of fidget factor, which makes it kind of fun. You are going to wear your thumb out a little. That's the case with all front flippers. You're going to wear your thumb out. You can see there that that is 100% a front flipper callus or dead skin, really, that's being formed by that. But it does add some fidget factor that's not present in other designs. This one's done good. And I like that there's a little hole in it. I think that's nice. It's also not sharp. Everything's been knocked down up here. So you can do it quite a few times before your thumb tires out or before it starts to kind of bother you. The blade is a Persian style sort of upswept or trailing point blade. I personally am not a big fan aesthetically of those. And there's slight recurve right here. Some people really like these. Me personally, I mean, the blade will work absolutely for EDC. I mean, your puncture test, no problem, and it'll do some decent slicing for sure. I just don't really like how they look. And you know, my ideal version of this knife aesthetically would have just been to do a more straight drop point blade with no recurve and to not have this area back down here. But if you can imagine that with me, essentially what I've created are the exact same aesthetic lines as the bug out or any other really common just straight backed knife, right? So I'm in a lot of ways, my ideal version of this would have just been a more boring design that we've already got a billion of, right? So this does give it some character. And for people who really like that trailing point, you know, maybe this is going to be your cup of tea. As is usually the case with Kansept knives, we've got S35VN there on the blade, which is great. I love S35VN, and it's definitely appropriate at this price point. Then we have K1014A2, which is why I hate when codes are on the blade. And it says Mujir, M-U-J-I-R right there. I wish we didn't have the name of the blade on there, but okay. And then it says Dirk Pinkerton. Would have been nice if it just said Dirk Pinkerton and had the Kansept logo and maybe S35VN, but it doesn't, and that's fine. It's not really hurting anything. This blade does have a flat that carries out about 70% the length of the blade. There is reasonable thickness out to the tip. Boy, this camera is not wanting to focus today. Not a ton of material, though. This way, right? Like this way, you can see, and it's fairly thick out to the tip. But this way, because of the style of the blade, the trailing point, right, and the fact that it's kind of a narrow blade, you don't have a lot of material out here. So S35VN is not a delicate composition, right? I mean, a lot of that depends on heat treat and all that. But yeah, the geometry of the blade is not going to result in, you know, something you're going to want to go poking in and prying around with a whole lot. This is generally going to be a more of just a poker and a general cutter, right? The geometry down to the edge, it's definitely not thin, but I wouldn't call it excessively thick either. It'll slice. I mean, it's a common geometry. It's something that we see in a lot of knives. The blade is done well and has an excellent tumbled finish. I've talked about this many times. I love Kansept's tumbled finish. I think they do a great job with it, and it really just looks great. Overall, I think the blade is excellent. Moving down here, you can see we do not have a lanyard hole. We've just got a lanyard bar, and it's cut into the backspacer. I think that's a great way to do that. I don't really like lanyards, but I don't mind there being a lanyard bar on there, right? It's out of the way, and people who like lanyards can utilize it. The pocket clip is kind of just its own thing. It's not necessarily going against the design, but it's not necessarily something that looks ultra specific to the design. It's just a pocket clip, right? It does have that nice ramp that I prefer, so it's going to rise to meet generally any thickness of pocket seam. It does kind of have like those 90-degree edges where it's okay. It's not bad. It's just not like rounded or I can feel it when I put my hands on it, but it is flat, right? And it's kind of neat that it's got this little groove through it. I kind of like the groove, right? To the pocket clip, I'm just kind of meh on the pocket clip. It'll work. It carries the knife reasonably deep. Other than that, it's not anything ultra special, but a lot of that's going to come down to preference. This knife locks up at about 35 to 40%. It does have a steel lock bar insert, which is pretty much the standard, right? The stop pin is actually, where is it located? It is internal, and it does, sorry, I was looking at it off camera. It does follow the blade, and it rides in a slot on the inside of the frame. That's a great design, great way to do that, so that's fine. And the blade does center up perfectly, and it also locks up perfectly. No blade play up, down, left, or right. It's kind of straightforward. My favorite thing about this knife is definitely the finish. Honestly, the overall profile is not really doing it for me, but it might do it for you. Materials here, definitely appropriate for what they want for it, $200. The overall build quality is good. I just don't really like these corners, especially with the pivot. I think even with that, with the finish, right? I think no matter what the finish is, I think these should have been knocked down a little bit more. It is definitely easy to manipulate. It's just there's some minor little things here or there. I can't really count off on this knife for having design elements that don't speak to me aesthetically. There's just a couple of little, it's really just the angular nature of the corners. I just wish it was knocked down more, right? It's got okay ergonomics. It's got great fit and finish. It's got great action. The finish on the blade looks great. I can't stress that enough. I love the finish on the titanium, but again, that's a personal thing. All the way around, this is an okay knife. There's lots and lots and lots of competition at the $200 price point. If you really, really like this finish, or you really like the profile, you like the combination of materials, I think this is going to be a no-brainer. It's not going to be for everybody, but generally speaking, yeah, it's a recommendable knife. It's a good knife. It's another, pretty good design from Kansept. I think Kansept has a lot of pretty good designs, and they've got a few home runs. That's kind of, it seems like what's happening. I like this. With a few changes, I would have been really excited about it, but those changes would have involved changing the blade and the handle profile a bit, right? So yeah, if you like this, go for it. I think this is a good knife. Not a big knife, but it'll definitely, I think, serve its purpose well for most people. I don't know that there's a whole lot more that I can say. Again, you can check this knife out down in the description and all the different variants that are available. You can also check out Kansept knives right down below as well. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.